Everybody, we're getting started in a minute.
You're good?
I'm good.
You're okay.
Good, yeah.
It's all good.
All right.
That's the revolution.
Just to let you all know, you will not be on camera this way. There's one single person restroom right here, and if that one is taken, there, you go down the hall a little bit, hook around on the left, and the door right here has the codes to those restrooms, so feel free to use those anytime you want. Coffee, donuts.
What do you want the check written out to?
Sodas, help
to Main
yourself.
Street? That works.
2 Ks.
We're about.
No worries.
You ready? Okay. Jesus. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome everyone to Emerald City Metropolitan Community Church, Seattle. I am Pastor Brian, and I welcome you all into this space. So glad that you're here on this special Sunday. It's not just the second Sunday of Advent, but we have special guest speaker today, Jay Baker. So happy to see him and reconnect after many years. Just finding ourselves here in Seattle, so that's really cool. Today is Peace Sunday in Advent. Last week was Hope, so today is Peace, which is kind of serendipitous too, since that's what Jay loves to talk about. So we will be doing that. All right. We light the Advent wreath. Last week's candle of hope. Today's candle of peace. Please join me in our affirmation. We light the candle of peace. We affirm shalom and salam, wholeness for all. May peace prevail on earth. Amen. I am tired and weary, I must toil on, till our God comes to call me away. Where the morning is bright, and our all is light, and the night is as fair as the day. There'll be peace in the valley for me someday. There'll be peace in the valley for me. I may know no more sorrow and sadness or trouble. There'll be peace in the valley for me. There the flowers will be blooming, the grass will be green, and the skies will be clear and serene. The sun never shines, giving one endless beam, and the clouds there will never be seen. There'll be peace in the valley for me someday. There'll be peace in the valley for me. I pray no sorrows that trouble with me. There'll be peace in the valley for me. There the bear will be gentle, the wolf will be tame, and the lion will lay by the lamb. The host from the wild will be led by a child. I'll be changed from the creature I am. There'll be peace in the valley for me someday. There'll be peace in the valley for me. I pray no more sorrow, sadness, trouble. There'll be peace in the valley for me. The peace of Christ is with you.
And also with you.
You don't have to get up, but greet your neighbor with a sign of peace. Peace. All right. It's now time for community prayer, so I'll ask Demi to come and lead us.
Yeah. One of our favorite things about being part of a community is we get to share our lives with each other. When we share concerns, the concerns seemed halved, and when we share joys, our joys seemed doubled. So who has a prayer for us today? James?
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, definitely, I want to pray and ask for prayer for all the homeless people out there. I prayed with a young woman twice. there with their cat, and, you know, I just worry about these people, and I just pray that they're better taken care of and have the things they need, including housing and warm everything. And also, praying for a young man in my building who's still struggling. His mental health is declining, and I'm hoping somehow he gets better, gets the help he needs. And also praying for a person who came here once. She's been kind of busy. She's struggling with living in the city. She's a trans person, and she's really scared with the atmosphere we're living in right now. So, you know, prayers for all of our community, but especially for the trans people around the country and around the world.
Yeah. Megan?
First of all, praises. My next book's published,
Yeah.
which is really exciting. So that means I continue to get paid. So the other thing is prayers for my stepson and his family with their mental health, or with their health issues that they're facing, physical health issues they're facing, and prayers for all those people suffering under war and pseudo wars around the world.
Mm-hmm. Sarah?
On the broad scale, I want to say praises for the liberation of Syria. The Assad regime has finally fallen, and I mean, we'll see how it plays out, but it looks like the rebels are setting up to actually try to build a peaceful government, which is very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Might finally see an end to violence in Syria, at least for a while. And on the smaller scale, prayers for the end of my term. I have a lot of work that I need to get done, and I'm not looking forward to doing it. So
Mm-hmm.
could use a little bit of support there.
Joe?
Just, I know mental health's already been mentioned, but, you know, I've been struggling a lot. Christmas time has always been the hardest time, you know, because not only is it just regular depression, but also seasonal affective, which vitamin D helps with, but doesn't replace sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just been finding myself really struggling to do anything beyond basic survival stuff.
Beck?
I would say some praises just for the level of community that we have in this area. I've been starting to attend more like polyamory, like family style events, and it's been really lovely to be able to experience that, and just knowing that people have drawn me into that community, I'm really grateful for. And just the small thing, you know, I quite literally, God only knows how I ended up where I am. So it's really been lovely to experience that, and especially here.
Yeah, we're glad you're here. Sue?
My youngest daughter had her baby,
Aww.
and both mom and baby are doing well.
Yay.
So just prayers for them to continue doing well.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Just quickly, I'm very happy to be here with my son,
Mm-hmm.
and have the opportunity to join with you in fellowship, but this is just an important time for us to be together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we're really glad you're here. All right. We also know that everybody has things on their hearts and minds that they're thinking about. So let's bring them to God as we take deep breaths and go into prayer. God, you are with us all year. And this time of year, as the weather is getting dark, as people are starting to go into their homes and recover from the year, as we start spending time with loved ones, as we finish big year-long projects, as we start anticipating all of the things that we will do next year, as we mourn for the people who are in conflict, as we rejoice for the people who are coming together, in everything, you are there. This time of year can be so challenging as we deal with seasonal depression and expectations and family issues. But in everything, you are giving us light. You gave us yourself and your son and this whole world that we live in together. You gave us the friends and community and chosen family that we hold dear. You've given us a place to be together today. You've given us another day of being able to take breaths and being with you. So as we recover, as we mourn, as we celebrate, as we spend this day with you, we ask that you show us all the ways you're working for love and peace and hope. Help us to be our bridge to our neighbors. Help us to connect to ourselves and to each other. And may we always see you in the joy and the light this time of year. Amen.
Amen.
Let's take a moment of silent prayer.
Light the candle, illuminate your heart. Don't be afraid of the dark. Along with winter comes the sound of snowfall, resting heavy upon our souls. Bring out the old, bring in the new. Bless and release what you have to with love, with hope, with love. There above us a brilliant evening sky. Let spirit fly with the constellations. Lift up our voices in prayerful harmony. Join together in the jubilation. Bring out the old, bring in the new. Bless and release what you have to with love, with hope, with love. Bring out the old, bring in the new. Bless and release what you have to with love, with hope, with love. Light the candle, illuminate your homes.
Our first reading today is a reading from Psalm 23 of the Common English Bible. The divine is my shepherd, I lack nothing. God lets me rest in grassy meadows. God leads me to restful waters. God keeps me alive. God guides me in proper paths for the sake of God's good name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no danger because you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they protect me. You set a table for me right in front of my enemies. You bathe my head in oil, and my cup is so full it spills over. Yes, goodness and faithful love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the divine's house as long as I live. In these human words, God's voice is heard. Thanks be to God.
Please rise as you're able for the reading of the gospel. A reading from Psalm 23. I'm sorry, wrong one. Gospel of Luke, chapter 1, verses 26 through 38 of the Women's Lectionary. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent by God to a town of Galilee, Nazareth, to a virgin betrothed to a man who was Joseph of the house of David, and the name of the virgin was Mary. And the angel came to Mary and said, Rejoice, favored one, the Most High God is with you. Now she was troubled by the angel's words and pondered what sort of greeting this was. Then the angel said to her, Fear not, Mary, for you have found favor with God. And now you will conceive in your womb and give birth to a son, and you will name him Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. And the sovereign God will give him the throne of his ancestor David. He will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his sovereignty there will be no end. Then Mary said to the angel, How can this be, since I have not known a man intimately? The angel said to her, The Holy Spirit, she will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore the one born will be holy. He will be called the Son of God. And now Elizabeth, your kinswoman, has even conceived a son in her old age. And this is the 6th month for she who is called barren. For nothing will be impossible with God. Then Mary said, Here am I, the woman slave of God. Let it be with me according to your word. Then the angel left her. This is the gospel, the good news. Praise to you, Jesus the Anointed.
All right. Before Jay comes up, I'll just let you know, if you don't, Jay Baker is here as a guest speaker, and hello to everyone at Revolution Church as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us here. Something a little different from you all than usual, but it's a treat for us to have Jay here, who is a speaker, one of the founding pastors of Revolution Church 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And has been ever since, all around the country, an author. So if you would like to purchase one of the books after, then he's got those to sign in the front room. What else about you?
Oh, I don't know. I'm tired.
and world weary with the peace and justice that has to happen in this world. So if you want to learn more, revolutionchurch.com has links to all the social media stuff. So please welcome Jay Baker.
I'm sure my group, onliners, are like, what's going on? We haven't heard music. You think you're really liberal until you meet my group, and then they're like, music? Are they conservative or liberal with the music? I don't know. I think we don't know anymore. That's okay. We don't need to know. And I'll talk about that. Because you're going to wonder, well, Jay, Dr. King and Malcolm X, and I talked about Malcolm X last week and his trip to Mecca and the impact on inclusion that had towards his work. And one of the reasons he is one of my heroes, and Dr. King, I feel I have been a student of his work for many years. Also John Hume, who is a politician, oh my gosh, but in Northern Ireland, who helped bring the peace process during the Troubles. Also Paul Tillich, Bayard Rustin, and other folks. So I'm going to, just lay that out there, because today might seem, what did I do with my notebook? I laid it under my Bible. So there you go, everybody. I have not spoken in a church in a long time. So it's really great to be here. I've had a very surreal few weeks. A couple weeks ago, I went is it down? It's over to New York City, and saw my mom's life in musical form at a Broadway show, and put on by Elton John. And I met Elton John, which was really surreal, and Michael Stipes from REM, which was kind of really a big deal for me because he kind of helped me survive high school. It was just really surreal. And then I came back home and sold Christmas trees one day, and then painted houses the next, and then sold Christmas trees, and then painted house apartments. So you know, it's a wild life. It's a weird world, you know. Just like all of you, I struggle with my mental health as well during the holidays. It's such a tough time. Finances are tight and things like that, and we all live in this world. But some of you may be familiar with my mom. It's Tammy Faye Baker. In case you're wondering, why did they do a play about his mom? Tammy Faye Baker. My dad's Jim Baker. And I have been an ally for, oh gosh, a very long time. 2005, I believe, is when I spoke out. I felt like I was a silent ally before then, and then one day Dr. King's words I was reading, he goes, "You'll not remember. It's not the words of our enemies you will remember, but the silence of our friends." And I remember sitting down with my mom, and I said, "Mom, I have to speak up." And she goes, "Well, can't you just do it and not say it?" You know, I'm like, "Well, no, Mom, I can't." She's like, "Well, I'm just worried what the church is going to do to you." And I said, "Well, Mom, I feel like there's people in this world that we're called to be peacemakers. We're called to bring people together. And I can't deny that call in my life." And she said she was proud of me and worried about me, and that happened. I guess so, you know. And I've been at the MCC has a very close place in my heart, because in 1985, on the biggest Christian television network in the world, my mother interviewed Steve Peters, who is a MCC pastor, or was an MCC pastor. He's recently passed this year. And he had AIDS. And my mom wanted to sit down and interview someone with AIDS in 1985. Now, if you remember, at that time, it was very terrifying, and most conservatives were saying horrible, horrible things. And my mom welcomed Steve onto the show, and they had an interview. And years later, it's really wild, because the first time I met Steve was at the convention, and I didn't put two and two together, because I thought there's no way he can be the same guy, because he had AIDS in '85. This must be somebody else who was on another show. You know, I mean, it just didn't click in my brain, because at that time it was a death sentence. And Steve ended up becoming like another father to me. When me and my dad fell out, Steve was there for me a lot up until his passing. And so also interesting enough is I remember coming to, before I became an ally or affirming, visiting an MCC that my mother was speaking at. And it was in Atlanta, Georgia. And it was an interesting moment for me, because I was like, "Oh, Mom, I don't know what's going on." And I went in and I was just like, "Oh, this is just church. These are just people who just want to go to church and love Jesus." And I was just like, wow. You know what I mean? It was just, I always tell people that there's something that's more powerful than any theological discussion or biblical scholarship or things like that. It's just being with human beings and seeing one another and recognizing our humanity. So, with that long intro, I know Brian's nervous because I'm a long speaker. He has to like listen to my talks in chunks. So I told him I'd shorten it up for today. You guys want to beat the Baptists to the buffet? That's an old Assemblies of God joke. That was the denomination I grew up in. The reason I picked Psalms 23 for today's reading, a few reasons, and I'll just bring those up, it says, even though I walk, and 4 says, even though I walk through the darkness valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me, and your rod and your staff, they comfort me. But this part in 5, really, the comfort me, I want you to focus, think about that. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, buckle up. These guys didn't make a lot of friends talking, and these guys are my heroes, so. You anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me. And what I want to talk to you about, and Paul Tillich has this talk. He was a great philosopher and theologian of the 20th century. He was on the cover of Time magazine when it mattered. And he had this sermon called You Are Accepted. And I mean, it is the best sermon I've ever heard on grace in my life. I actually go through it once a year at Revolution. We read it like it's scripture. But this point of that you are accepted no matter who you are, no matter what, you are accepted. You don't have to believe more, you don't have to think more, you are accepted. And I want you to sit in that acceptance and that grace today when I'm talking, okay? This is about progress, not perfection. I learned that in another club I'm a member of. So, for those who know that meaning will maybe know that saying. It's anonymous, so I can't tell you more about it. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me. As I was watching the news this week and I saw the murder of the CEO, and I listened to the comments and what people were saying, the voices of the unheard, and many quite diverse, of the suffering of those of us who have bad insurance, who can't take care of our own health care, who can't take care of loved ones, who can't do these type of things. And you kind of heard the crying out of the silent. And it says, and the thing is for me, is how I saw it, is like, not even our politicians on the left were listening. Much less our brothers and sisters on the right. And we're crying out, we're dying, we need help, we need this medication, we need to live. Poverty and medical care, groceries, are all human needs. It doesn't just affect those who follow the elephant or the jackass. That's from Public Enemy. By the time I get to Arizona. But neither of those groups were listening to us. Now, I don't condone violence. I am nonviolent. I believe in nonviolent solutions. And I'm afraid that if we don't start communicating better and we don't start hearing one another, that type of violence will continue. And that is why I'm here today and why I'm anywhere when I do this work. In Matthew, so you look at this, and here we have this almost prophecy of a type of, I will prepare a table before me in the presence, you will prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. Surely goodness and mercy will follow. And over in Matthew, I'm so used to just doing this by myself in my house, and I'm just not used to seeing all you lovely people. And it's really lovely. I'm so glad to be here. It's nice to be around human beings again. But man, I was nervous. I got up this morning, I was like, I haven't been this nervous in a long time about this. I forgot what it was like. I'm going to turn over to Matthew 5. Oh, listen to all those pages turning. So funny, none of us really even need Bibles anymore. I mean, I do. I love the Bible. I think it's one of my I really respect it highly. I think there's problems with it. I think there's definitely contradictions in it. I definitely think there's actually some, like the pastoral epistles, could really do without those, because I believe they're not supposed to be there. And just Jay's thinking because of biblical scholarship. But anyway, you like Paul better if you don't read those books anyway. And I'm a big Paulinian person, and people are always shocked, like, what? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, but if you read Paul in the way it was, in the true Paulinian way, it's very interesting. So the Beatitudes, we talk a lot about the Beatitudes, especially as progressives, as people on the left. We talk about the Beatitudes, but there's parts of the Beatitudes we don't like. I don't know about those parts. We kind of we like the first 11. You know what I mean? And then it's like, I don't want to talk about the other ones. I mean, heck, I don't want to talk about concerning divorce. I've been divorced twice, so I'll just skip that part. We're over that quickly. It's okay to laugh. It's okay. It's life. It's tragedy. We all have to live life on life's terms. There's no saints. I'm always surprised when we get so shocked when pastors make mistakes and fail, and people make mistakes. And we are all human. We all fall short. But yet God in his gracious kindness declares us not guilty. That's why it's called amazing grace, not semi-amazing grace. That's why it's called good news. When I first found out about grace, I was probably in my early 20s. And I had grown up in the church. But I just thought grace was like, oh, amazing grace. That's a nice song, Grace is just for entry, And then you have to start paying the bill. It's free to get in, but the drinks are like $80. Um, and no rated R movies, and no smoking, and no lusting. And that's what I thought religion was all about. You know, no good music, semi-good music. You know, every now and then you'll get a talented person. Bob Dylan will have a conversion or something, and you'll have a good, you know. But anyway, let's look at the Beatitudes for a second. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up to the mountain, and after he sat and his disciples came to him, and they began to speak and taught and saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for there is kindness in heaven." I feel very poor in spirit right now, I'll be honest with you. Really, life can be a struggle sometimes. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. You know, how many of us mourn? You know, and my mom's been gone since 2007, and I still feel that pain. But you know what it allows me to do is it allows me to comfort others. Sometimes the mourning or the mourners are the ones who are the comforters. Quite often, you know, sometimes it's just it hurts, it stinks. You know, you just don't need a lot of words. When I was a younger pastor, I would be like, I've got to say something really beautiful and crazy here, you know. And then sometimes I realize I just need to shut up and just sit with them, you know. Zip it. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Now, I often think we don't really think of meek as being this blessed thing, do we? You know, we're always like, oh, kind of a wallflower. I am totally introverted. Like, the fact that I do this for a job is kind of bizarre. Because I'm like, okay. You know, I went to the flea market, the punk rock flea market yesterday. And I was like exhausted afterwards, just walking around people. I'm like this the whole time, like, oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Pardon me, I'm sorry. Blessed are those who hunger for righteousness, for they will be filled. And I think we do hunger for that. I think when we talk about healthcare and when we talk about being able to afford food. One of the things during the troubles in Northern Ireland between the Catholics and the Protestants is, and everybody was like, I'm loyal to this flag. No, I'm loyal to that flag. And John Hume said, you can't eat a flag. And he says, and if we're going to make a difference for Ireland, we all have to do it together. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Most of the time. There should be a little asterisk by that one. Just going to say, can I be honest here? But it's good. Well, you know, you get mercy when you need it. Blessed are the pure of heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. See how many of these I decided. Oh, I just decided to go to 10 like everybody else. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. I don't like snakes either. Righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I want to say that again. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Now, I believe we are in a church. We are in an MCC church. These churches in the earlier days were burnt down. You know, just like our black brothers and sisters churches were being burnt down. You know, they were being persecuted. And when I look at here and think of the persecution, and I think people want sometimes to think like, well, if you're LGBTQ and you're being persecuted, there's still something, it's a really persecution, or are you really, you know, and yes, it is. I mean, I don't have preaching to the choir here, but the reason I say this is because I want you to hold on to that, because it's blessed are the for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, the kingdom of heaven isn't always something that's after death, okay? It's often, the kingdom of God and all that. Often it's God's grace, peace, and hope here on earth amongst us, if you want to get into the Greek and the Hebrew and all the good words like that. Now, why do I say this? Is because right now, you're about to be blessed a lot. We're running into a time where I think we are going to deal with different types of persecution. One of the things we try to do at Revolution is we don't always see each other because it's an online church, but we try to create a diverse community. And by diversity, I mean diversity of thought. So I have some people who are conservatives and some people who are liberals and some people who are atheists and some people who are agnostics and different folks that are part of the community. And we started this thing about disagreeing well. That had to be that really had to nail that one down a lot. And then you notice one day one of my friends who is queer, they, them, is being defended by someone else that I knew growing up who's attending my church, who is a conservative evangelical, is defending them and sticking with them and helping them argue well with someone who is kind of coming their way. So diversity is a tough thing, true diversity. We say we want diversity, but then somehow we all end up looking the same in our church. Or we're like, we want diversity as long as we all believe exactly the same thing. And that's I'll get into that in a second. But let's just, so Matthew 5, the Beatitudes are there, but something happens with Matthew, and also the persecution here. Let's think about the persecution, what's happening. Because you might say, well, that persecution was different. These are citizens living in an occupied territory by Rome. Eventually, a lot of these Christians would be fed to animals or burned to light parties. Like they would literally have parties and be like, oh, we're going to tie you up here and we're going to burn you and you're going to be part of the, talk about intimidation, like everybody stay in line. I mean, that's why crucifixions were up on hills. They could see like, hey, everybody, just in case you're thinking about doing anything else than what we do, there it is. So this is genuine persecution that's happening to these folks. And so what I called this talk is Now is the Time. My mom used to have a song called Now is the Time for You. And why I'm saying now is the time is we're in a time where the stakes are high. People are nervous. But I'm here to say we might need to think about taking a stand and stepping up. People love to hear it from a white heterosexual cis male. Still trying to figure out the cis part. I misspelled it for wrong when I was writing SIS, and I was like, that's so strange. I have dyslexia too, so it's like, and I wrote it down like someone's like, oh, I think that's something else, Jay. I was like, oh, thanks. Hey sis, what's up? Sister. I was like, why are you calling me sister? I did one time have somebody try to say that to me who was trying to own me in a conversation. I was like, well, how do you know? They were right, but I just was, we were just arguing on Instagram like it's dummies. Like you do. But around 41 it says, why did I write Matthew 5:41? Sorry, here it is. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd mile. This is also part of the Beatitudes. Do we know why Jesus is saying this? And you may have heard this before, but Roman soldiers, the occupying military, could take someone who lived there, take a local, and say, carry my pack. But they could only say for 1 mile. You could only have to carry it for 1 mile, but still 1 mile. Good Lord. And you'd have to go yes, or you'd be made an example of. You'd be lighting the next party. So you had to carry it. And Jesus says, go the extra mile. My friend Pete Rollins has a talk on this where he goes there. Jesus walks upon this church, and it's called the Church of the 2nd Mile. And then Jesus has to get up and tell them they need to go the 3rd mile. But this idea of saying, I'm going to go the extra mile when my oppressor tries to oppress me. I'm going to take my power back. And I'm going to somehow take my power back and show love at the same time. I mean, that was always the powerful thing for me about nonviolence. I remember reading this thing where people would ask Dr. King, like, how do you, what are secret ways we can defend ourselves when we're being hit? And he goes, you don't. You just get hit. And you can understand why Malcolm was like, no. No, you don't, for a long time. But this idea of going the extra mile for those. See, the enemy, were those, as I said before, is the Roman government, occupied territory. So it's, and religious leaders. And so if you look at this, what's happening here, it's not very different than what we're going into right now and today. Now, we can pretend like it hasn't been happening under our liberal brothers and say, oh, because I'm a lifelong Democrat, so I could just pretend like, oh, yeah, no, it's been really cool. And now we're going to go through all this bad stuff. But we've gone through bad stuff. We are having a hard time buying our groceries. We have bad health insurance. We can't put our faith in men and in these systems. Now, we can try to work with these systems and try to change these systems, but these systems are often oppressors. Even under Democrats, we're still one of the greatest purveyors of violence across the world. So we also have to be willing to be honest, because it's very easy to scapegoat groups and say, well, it's their fault. But I could introduce you to people who in my life who were conservatives and all this stuff, who showed me grace at certain times in my life and showed me mercy and gave me a place. And even though they thought, well, just don't bring that heresy over here, Mr. Baker, but I still feel like I need to help you. You know what I mean? Like, literally had that said to me once. Like, I like you having you here at the church. Just don't bring that heresy with you. I was like, okay. That was a, it's the good, it wasn't Goodwill. It's the Salvation Army. It was a Salvation Army church. It's like, wow, these guys are a little more open-minded than I thought, as long as I just keep the heresy back here. Awesome. And so 43 goes on to say, if you've heard it was said that you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I say to you, love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you. Another thing that Dr. King said is, thank goodness it didn't say you need to like your enemy. He goes, because I didn't like having my house burnt down. Didn't like the way they treated me at the lunch table. I didn't like getting beat by the police officers. But I had to love them. Dr. King also said the only force capable of turning an enemy into a friend is love. So pray for those who persecute you. With one of my friends, some of my friends have pushed back on me on this, and one of my friends, we talked about loving from afar. Because sometimes we're just not in the mental state to be in the fight. Am I right? So sometimes so I look at that praying for your enemies as the idea of, I'm going to love from afar. Even if you don't think my prayers go up to Jesus, it's still, you're thinking about that person, you're hoping the best for them, you're sending good vibes, and you know what I'm saying? Do you hear me, preacher? I'm just kidding. I grew up these Sundays with guys who do stuff like that. Preacher, you listening, preacher? Preacher Brian? Preacher Brian. Did you know that they used to have preachers read out loud because a lot of the preachers couldn't read, so they'd have somebody read on? Did you know that? Anyway, biblical history. I love it, and I'm a nerd. That's how that started. All right, so there's your Beatitudes. Are we going to be followers of Jesus? That's the question I'm asking. And today I am not preaching salvation to the non-converted or the non-convinced, but I'm preaching salvation to the believers today. To be peacemakers, to see nuance, to not judge one another, to not judge it, and to not scapegoat the other. It may be you sitting next to someone and sharing a meal at a table amongst your enemies that changes them, that no amount of apologetics, unfortunately, I don't like apologetics, could do. No amount of scholarship, no amount of theology could do. Reverend Barber tells a story of when they were doing the Poor People's Campaign and they were working with coal miners. They couldn't afford to eat. And they're working like probably the hardest work in the world. And he said the problem was that with the coal miners you had black coal miners and then you had some of the white coal miners who were in the Klan. And he's like, I'm trying to organize these folks together. But they were all hungry enough to organize. It's funny what hunger and home and children will do. And they organized this group, and he said by the time, he said 90% of the Klansmen had dropped out of the Klan because they saw the humanity of their black brothers and sisters. Reverend Barbara has a book out right now called White Poverty. And I really recommend reading it. It's really amazing. I was really like, I went and asked for it, and the people looked at me like, because you don't think, they thought like it was going to be written by a white guy, like, do you have white poverty? And I'm like probably like, here in the town, the most liberal area, and they're like rolling their eyes like, what is this? And I'm like, oh, it's written by a pastor. And they're like, of course it is. And I was like, oh gosh. But, oh well. We all have assumptions. So Matthew 7:12 through 3. See, I still did use all the verses. Can you take this and you just take a break if you need to? Because he listens to me in portions. It's just a joke, guys. I have dry humor. It's not passive-aggressive humor, because I know we're in the north, so you might think I'm passive. No, it's just dry humor. Isn't that special? I lived in Minnesota. You want to talk about passive-aggressive? They're like, oh, that's an interesting tattoo. I got kicked out of the UPS. I'm not going to tell that story, though. But let's just say I just moved from New York, and you talk a little bit different when you live in New York than you do when you're in Minnesota. A few guidelines that I forgot about. So, Matthew, I'll let you know if you're heading to Minnesota. Matthew 7:12 says, and everything do to others as you would have them do to you, for this is the law and the prophets. Could you imagine if we truly believed this, how we would act on social media, how we would act with each other, and how we would treat each other? Now, I'm putting my hope in folks like the MCC we got to do this together because we need each other. I want to be clear, like I struggle with like suicidal thoughts. I'm a survivor of suicide. My pain is real. I know there's certain aspects of things that I get because of the color of my skin and things like that, but there's also certain aspects of where I'm looked down upon for certain reasons as well. And that pain and that hurt, and sometimes the worst enemy can be up here. I've had to learn how to like talk kind to myself. One of my therapists said, would you say to that anyone in your congregation what you say to yourself? I was like, no. And they're like, well, then you need to shut up. I was like, what? But let's look at this one. In closing. It's only 30 more minutes, and I'm closing. I'm just kidding. Did anybody grow up evangelical? Okay. In closing, that's what the pastor says when he gets nervous and he thinks he's losing the group, wants to wake you up. Or I get you to stand up and shake and all that stuff. Don't worry, I'm not going to do that. My mom would walk up to people and be like, are you listening, honey? Terrified. Why did you? She actually did that at the MCC church in Atlanta. She told everybody, shh. She crept up on the guy sleeping, and I was like, oh, Mom, please stop. He's just tired. He works. Tammy Faye, get away with whatever she wanted to. 13 here says, enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide, and the road is easy that leads to destruction, and there are many who take it. For the gate is narrow, and the road is hard that leads to life, and there are few who find it. And I don't think this is about salvation, but I think this is about a life well lived. And growing up, I thought that wide road was all the stuff I said before, like rock and roll, watch whatever you want, like cigarettes and alcohol, all that fun stuff. I mean, not fun stuff, all that bad stuff. And tattoos. What he said, don't smoke, chew, or go with girls that do, is what they used to tell my dad when he was a kid. Are the girls that do what? Do they smoke and chew, or do they do something else? Just asking for a friend, Dad. Asking for a friend. Did you get this? The gate is wide. But what I've realized is the narrow road is us not Paul says about in Corinthians 13, love does not demand its own way. It keeps no record of when it's been wronged. So we really have to get an attitude change and a mental change. And I don't do this either. And that's why I always say it's progress, not perfection. It's one day at a time, folks. This is not easy. But if we're going to try to take the narrow road is loving others who aren't like us. We've asked for tolerance for a long time. But it's easier to ask for tolerance than to show tolerance. And I'm not here to lay any heavy burdens on you, because I'll be with you. I'll walk in front if you need me to, and not to be cool, just to like take a fist or two if I have to, whatever it takes. And I don't have a martyr complex. I just love people. I'm grateful for that. Both of my parents taught me that, the importance of loving others. Period. Love was always the trump card in my family. The Bible gets in the way of the love, you put the Bible down. You got to love people. Period. So the wide road, the easy way, hate for hate, stay divided. Seems cool to be angry, but the times are more forward but if the time is to move forward and to be we need to be part of the solution rather than the problem. And I can tell you what, I have a lot of friends and colleagues who've made a very good living out of being negative and being one-sided and getting involved in politics. And I'm talking about the left, I'm not even talking about the right. Who scapegoat and kind of traded one dogma for another. And it's almost like a progressive legalism of types. And I'll tell you what, it didn't work for me when my friends on the right used the legalism. And now it doesn't work too good for me and my friends on the left, because when I call them, I'm like, hey, you ever think about that? And they're like, no, go away. I'm like, oh, okay. I have not won a lot of popularity contests, and my career has pretty much gone down the hill because of that. But that is sometimes the price of taking the narrow road. But we got to be the narrow road walkers, because that's where the hurting is. That's where the dying is. That's the road the Good Samaritan went down. And he didn't just say, what will happen to this man, but he said, what will happen to me if I don't stop for this man? What will happen to me if I don't speak up? I don't want my kids, I have a 7-year-old girl, 9-year-old boy, and I don't want my kids to grow up to be bitter because people rather be popular than doing the hard work of justice and love. And you would say it's Peace Sunday. You've got it. To have peace, we want true peace, so we want peace with justice. We just don't want peace that's just like, ah. I used to be a people pleaser, so I know that type of peace where you're just like, I'm just going to put off all this horribleness for just a few more weeks, and then it all just comes to fruition, like everything just falls apart twice as bad. I'm not talking about that kind of peace. I'm talking about the peace that leads to justice. That leads to, as John Hume would say, unity through diversity. But he also says that requires us all to be at the table. And so when we look at that Psalms, and that Psalm says he has set a place for me at a table amongst my enemies. We talk so much about tables. Is there a place for me at the table? Is there a place for me at the table? And you might realize, like, oh, we got this table over here and it's feeling a little crowded. And then you look over at your enemies and you're like, oh, there's a space over there. I don't feel like there's a place for me at the table, because you don't want to sit with your enemies. I don't want to sit with people who hate me or think I'm not educated enough or think I'm, whatever, it is. But I think we can't truly ask for that tolerance if we're unwilling to give it. But that's why I believe in nonviolence and why I believe in peace, because I believe this is the peace that passes understanding, and we're going to have to let it pass our understanding a little bit in order to make this world a better place. I don't know where we're going, but I feel nervous. I'm with you all. I feel nervous. I feel nervous when I saw that CEO shot. I felt nervous because I understood the pain on both sides. It makes me nervous. Dr. King said, "Hate does not drive out hate. Only love can do that." And this is what I'll say to you all today, in closing. If you can find a better way to do this, rather than following nonviolence, and I would really recommend going on and looking at Dr. King's nonviolence work and some of the steps of nonviolence. I worked with Soul Force, and that really woke me up to nonviolence. I did a lot of work with them. And one of the great things about nonviolence is you do the nonviolence action, but then there's this thing called debriefing afterwards, which I was a little bit worried about at first. And then I realized it was talking. And At least 2 people got the joke. I'm a dad, and I have lots of dad jokes. But getting together and having conversation, sometimes those conversations would be us crying and weeping. Sometimes those conversations would be us yelling at each other. You know, but it was vitally important to realize after you've been treated that way is to just sit down and have a conversation and with people you love and you trust. And I know that can seem few and far these days, but it's important. That's why a lot of us try to find counselors that will take our crappy insurance. The empathy for suffering in the Gaza. And what happened to the Israelis. You know, I mean, there's this constant suffering we see, and then we're thrown into this thing of going, well, you have to choose between these 2 guys, and both of these guys support all this violence. And people are going, well, I'm just going to put out the mind. And I just think this is the wrong idea to have. Is I'm going to put it out of my mind, the suffering of others, and focus more on my suffering. And I'm going to be worried about my suffering. Now, it's human to do that. It's completely human to do that. I think about it. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, our senators think about that when they're like, don't give people health insurance for all, but we'll make sure you have health insurance. We'll give you the best. We'll give you the double diamond plan. Just don't give it to anybody else. You know, so that's people thinking of themselves. Those are the people that go, I don't like those people. Well, we got to make sure that we don't mirror. Was it Nietzsche who said, those who fight monsters should beware of not becoming monsters themselves? Ignoring others' suffering and demanding justice for our own makes us not only human, but it also makes us hypocrites. But I'll tell you one thing that humanity desperately needs. It needs us. It needs humanity. It needs us to see each other as humanity. We don't need any more things to separate us and divide us. That's why Paul, in the book of Galatians, he's trying to bring these 2 divided groups together in Galatians. And he goes, there is neither male nor female, Jew nor Gentile, slave nor free. He doesn't say there is Jew and Gentile, there is male and female. He goes, no, there is neither. We are all one in Christ. Now, if you say, I'm not really, Christianity makes me a little weird. Well, we're all one in love. We're finite. Love is infinite. And it's hard. It's a hard road to toil. But that is my message for today, is love each other and love each other radically and love your enemies. If you need, at afar. Say a little prayer. I'm not saying you need to go argue with them and get triggered. And if you know yourself, take care of yourself. But some of you are ready to have the tough conversations and to argue well. You know, I had a conversation like that recently where I was with a friend of mine who we were both in the emergent church together, and we were arguing over something very vital, and I realized I was getting angry. And I said, is it okay if we continue this talk later? I said, because I'm about to step into the not arguing well portion of our conversation, and I don't want to be that guy. You know, I won't be able to unsay the things I'm going to say and regret for saying because my emotions are a hold of me. And he said, sure. And we were able to, a few weeks later, get together and have that conversation. And guess what? We agreed at that point that we still needed to talk more. So that's my encouragement. Now is the time. The world needs us. We're Obi-Wan, you're my only hope. Thanks, guys. Oh, thank you. I've done that a million times. I don't even know where is it. I'm going to let you Revolution people go. Thanks for coming out today. Love you guys, and check out revolutionchurch.com. Bye.